For prehistoric humans, the mammoth was not just an animal. It was a moving mountain of flesh and bone, a walking storehouse of food, warmth, and survival. At the same time, it was one of the most dangerous creatures a human could ever face. To hunt a mammoth was to gamble everything: strength, skill, teamwork, and life itself. There were no second chances. One mistake meant death. The Ice Age world in which mammoths and humans coexisted was harsh beyond modern imagination. Vast stretches of land were locked in ice for most of the year. Winters were long, dark, and merciless. Food was unpredictable, and starvation was always close. In this environment, humans could not rely on small game alone. Rabbits, birds, and fish were useful, but they could not sustain entire groups through endless winters. Mammoths, however, offered something nothing else could: massive quantities of meat, fat, hide, and bone in a single kill. Yet hunting a mammoth was not a heroic adventure. It was desperation turned into strategy. Early humans did not wake up eager to challenge a 6-ton animal armed only with stone tools. They hunted mammoths because the alternative was slow death by hunger and cold. Mammoths were enormous. Standing up to 4 meters tall at the shoulder and weighing several tons, they were covered in thick fur and layers of fat designed to protect them from the freezing climate. Their tusks, sometimes longer than a human body, curved outward and forward, capable of lifting, stabbing, and crushing. A single swing could shatter bones. Their intelligence and social structure made them even more dangerous. Mammoths lived in herds, protected their young fiercely, and reacted violently to threats. Humans, by comparison, were fragile. They had no metal weapons, no armour, no horses, no bows in the earliest periods. Their primary weapons were stone-tipped spears, wooden shafts hardened by fire, and their own coordination and intelligence. On open ground, a mammoth could easily kill multiple humans within seconds. The only way humans could win was by planning, cooperation, and deep understanding of their prey. The decision to hunt a mammoth usually came after careful discussion within the group. Food stores would be low. Smaller game might have disappeared. Winter might be tightening its grip. Elders, those who had survived previous hunts, would recall what worked and what failed. Young hunters listened closely, knowing their lives depended on knowledge passed down through stories rather than written instruction. Preparation for a mammoth hunt could take days or weeks. Spears were repaired and sharpened. Stone points were carefully knapped to ensure they could penetrate thick hide. Wooden shafts were straightened, balanced, and hardened in fire. Sinew was checked. Every tool mattered. A broken spear during a hunt could mean death.
Scouting was essential. Humans tracked mammoth herds across vast, frozen landscapes, reading footprints pressed deep into snow or mud. They examined broken vegetation, dung, and trampled ground to determine herd size, direction, and health. Hunters looked for weaknesses: an injured adult, an elderly individual, or a calf that could be separated from the group. A healthy adult mammoth was the most dangerous target, and usually avoided unless no other option existed. Terrain mattered more than weapons. Humans could not overpower mammoths with force, but they could use the land itself as a weapon. Cliffs, narrow valleys, frozen rivers, deep snow, mud pits, and soft ground became killing grounds. Archaeological evidence shows mammoth remains clustered near cliffs and natural traps, suggesting that humans deliberately chose locations where mammoths could be slowed, trapped, or forced to fall. When the hunt began, it was loud, chaotic, and terrifying. Humans used shouting, movement, thrown stones, and fire to panic the herd. The goal was not to kill immediately,
but to create confusion. Mammoths trumpeted loudly, forming defensive circles around calves. The ground shook as they moved, snow flew, the air filled with sound and fear. Separating a mammoth from the herd was the most dangerous phase. Humans had to position themselves carefully, driving the target toward the chosen trap while avoiding the tusks and feet of other animals. One wrong step could result in being trampled or impaled. Injuries were common. Broken bones, crushed ribs, and puncture wounds were a constant risk. Once a mammoth was isolated and slowed by terrain, humans began the long process of wearing it down. Spears were thrown from a distance, aimed at vulnerable areas like the sides, legs, or underbelly. Most spears did not kill instantly. Instead, they caused bleeding, pain, and exhaustion. The goal was to weaken the mammoth gradually while minimizing risk to the hunters. This phase could last hours or even days. Hunters followed the wounded animal, preventing it from resting or rejoining the herd. Cold temperatures helped slow blood clotting, increasing blood loss. The mammoth grew weaker with each step, but it also became more dangerous. A wounded mammoth was unpredictable, aggressive, and desperate. Archaeological evidence shows that many humans paid for these hunts with their lives. Skeletons from prehistoric sites display injuries consistent with mammoth attacks: shattered bones, crushed skulls, and deep puncture wounds. Some individuals survived severe injuries, indicating that others cared for them afterward. Cooperation and compassion were not luxuries, they were survival strategies. When the mammoth finally collapsed, the danger was still not over. Even dying, it could thrash, kick, or strike with its tusks. Hunters approached cautiously, delivering final blows to vital areas. Only when the massive body lay completely still did relief wash over the group. The moment after a mammoth's death was a mixture of exhaustion, shock, and relief. Silence often followed. The animal that had dominated the landscape for decades was gone. But celebration was brief. There was work to do, and time was limited. A mammoth carcass was a prize, but it was also a beacon. The smell of blood carried far across the frozen land, attracting predators such as wolves, cave lions, hyenas, and bears. Other human groups might also notice and attempt to steal the kill. Humans had to work fast. Butchering a mammoth was an enormous task. Stone tools cut through thick hide with difficulty. Fires were often lit nearby to keep hands warm and tools functional. Steam rose as warm flesh met cold air. Meat was cut into massive slabs. Fat was stripped carefully and prioritized above all else. Fat provided the calories needed to survive extreme cold and sustained people far longer than lean meat. Organs were removed and often eaten immediately. Blood soaked into the snow, staining the ground dark. Bones were cracked open for marrow, a rich source of nutrition. Tusks were set aside for later use in tools, shelters, and art. Tendons were removed and dried for sewing thread. Nothing was wasted. Waste meant hunger. Hunger meant death. Processing a mammoth could take days. Groups often set up temporary camps near the kill site. Fires burned constantly. Lookouts watched for predators and rival humans. Children and elders helped where they could, carrying smaller pieces, maintaining fires, and preparing hides. Food preservation was essential. Meat was dried in the cold air, smoked over fires, or frozen in pits dug into permafrost. These food caches could sustain a group for weeks or months if protected. Losing a cache to scavengers or rival groups could be catastrophic. The mammoth hunt shaped human society deeply. It required leadership, planning, communication, and trust. Individuals who proved skilled hunters or strategists gained respect. Knowledge was passed down through stories, rituals, and teaching. Children grew up hearing about past hunts, learning what mistakes to avoid and what strategies worked. Mammoths also held spiritual significance. Cave paintings across Europe and Asia depict mammoths in detailed, careful forms. Carvings and figurines suggest symbolic importance. Some groups may have believed mammoths possessed powerful spirits or represented forces of nature. Killing one was not just practical, it was meaningful. Over time, mammoths became less common. Climate changes altered their habitat. Human hunting pressure increased. Slowly, mammoth populations declined. As mammoths disappeared, humans were forced to adapt again, turning to smaller game, fishing, and eventually, new ways of living.
But for tens of thousands of years, mammoths and humans were locked in a deadly relationship. Mammoths fed humanity through the harshest climates the planet had ever known. Humans, in turn, became one of the few predators capable of killing them. The mammoth hunt was not a tale of brute strength. It was a story of intelligence over power, cooperation over force, and survival over fear. It showed what humans were capable of when pushed to the edge. Every successful hunt reinforced a lesson that still defines humanity today. Survival does not belong to the strongest creature, but to the one that learns, adapts, and works together. For prehistoric humans, the hunt was life or death in its purest form.